All right, so hi everybody. My name is Claus and I'm the CEO of Wi-Fi Now. And also, in the context of this new podcast series, I am a tech analyst, and I'm here with my very good friend Jeff Peel of newera.uk. Jeff, first of all, great to see you, and thanks for joining me for this, or joining us for this, I should perhaps say.
You're very welcome, Klaus. It's been fun over the last few weeks getting to know you a bit more. You and I have been, collaborating, I think, in terms of trying to spread the word of libertarian thinking vis-a-vis the tech industry. So it's good to start the process of chewing the fat collectively as to what craziness is going on in the world of tech.
And there really is a lot of craziness. And one of the reasons why we want to do this, which is supposed to be, let's see if we can actually manage to keep it under 30 minutes, but it's supposed to be like a 30-minute news and analysis kind of update on some of the craziness that's going on in the technocratic world that surrounds us, right? And we'll each pull up a few things. But Jeff, maybe just introduce Tech for Freedom for everyone out there, because it's a fairly new initiative, so people should know a little bit more about it first.
Yeah, well, it's it's the brainchild of us both. That we felt that people who were of the view that tech should be about innovation and human and technology is wonderful. You work in Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, and I used to work for one of the companies that introduced some of the first Wi-Fi products, a company called Precom, which is now it was divided up and divvied up across Hewlett-Packard and Huawei and various other organizations. But essentially, it was one of the first companies to introduce a Wi-Fi enabled device. The fact is that technology and digital technology is wonderful. It's enriching. It should make our lives much, much easier. But we don't really want technology to reach into every corner of our lives and tell us how to live those lives. And certainly when government and technology get aligned, and that's obviously what's going on in terms of the alignment of the tech bros with governments, and they want to sort of organize our lives, corral us, tell us how to think using AI. It's time, I think, for technologists, and I think you agree with me on this, to say enough is enough. It's time to refocus on what technology is supposed to be about. It's about enriching lives. It's about humanity. It's about innovation. It's not about dystopia and tyranny.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And exactly, enrichment, opportunity. I like to say opportunity for individual people. To me, always comes back to individual rights and liberties for each individual person, and not this collective statist, we have to do what's good for everybody, because that to me is the beginnings of totalitarianism, and we're seeing that unfortunately more and more. So I totally agree with you, Jeff, and I think it's time that people wake up to these things. Thankfully, more and more people are waking up to these things, and hopefully even more will start realizing what's going on through some of the work that we're doing now. And by the way, we should probably say as well that we plan to have a Technology for Freedom event, Congress, right? Sometime in early summer, which right now it looks like it's going to be in Geneva. We're hoping to do that, or that is certainly on in the pipeline. And Jeff, you want to say a few things about that? I think that's going to be super exciting.
Yes, and the reason, obviously, that we're suggesting that it be in Switzerland and Geneva. Well, for one thing, some of the sort of slightly dubious global organizations are based in Switzerland. World Economic. But it is a nation which apparently is committed to the idea of personal individual freedom. And so for that reason that we and also there are some technology companies based there, like Proton, for example, which is trailblazing the whole idea of privacy and security and individual rights to freedom, being able to communicate without people snooping over your email messages. So it's well known that a number of companies based in Switzerland have been trailblazing some of these ideas. Obviously, we're hoping that we'll have a number of keynote speakers from the tech industry or commentators, politicians, influencers who have a similar worldview to ourselves. So that's the hope. Obviously, it's all dependent on us getting some sponsorship. But hopefully, fingers crossed.
Exactly. And I don't think such a thing has, at least not to my knowledge, been done. I know in the US there are, a libertarian style organizations like Brownstone and obviously Mises, which is more academic, I think, that do things like this, but not in the sense that we plan, in the way that we're planning to do it. And from people that follow the, shall we say, the freedom community will recognize many of the folks, and we'll talk about that in a moment, actually, many of the folks that we have in mind as presenters and speakers at our event, which is great. And it'll also be I'm really, really looking forward to meeting people that I have followed and admired and have really been shining lights in the darkness for me during some very dark years, meeting them in person, and hopefully all that will come to pass. So I'm super excited about that. I think it's going to be incredibly meaningful. It's also going to be enormously enjoyable, but we'll have a lot more information to share about that later. Jeff, let's go into some of the news items that you picked up on, and I'm just going to bring them up because you sent me a few clips, and I'm going to bring them up in no particular order. I'm going to start with this one, and this is not something that I know anything about, but something that you wanted to comment on, and this is interesting. It's also completely new to me, by the way.
Well, yes, this is ISO is the International Standards Organization, and it popularized, peddles different standards that different companies will work towards. But in this particular case, ISO 20022, I'm not quite sure what way you say it, but it's up to you. ISO 20022 is an international standard that is being peddled particularly by the Bank of International Settlements. And this standard is essentially a standard by which pretty much all assets will be traded in the future. So they're working towards a standard that will permit central banks and other financial organizations that are blessed by our wonderful governments to trade tokens. And these are essentially securitized assets. So you'll be able to buy and sell tokens. This will all happen behind the scenes, and it's being piloted in the United Kingdom. This tokenized, centralized token trading platform, which, as I say, is a standard being pushed by the ISO. Now, I interviewed recently Miles Harris, who's an economist and commentator on his depth of knowledge on this stuff is astonishing.
Wow.
But ISO 20022 is essentially a manifestation of what's been happening also in the United States, in that we've been seeing the emergence of dollar stable coins, from organizations like Tether. So this is, if you like, the central bank version of dollar stable coins. So you can trade and transact with dollar stable coins from organizations like Tether. And if you're outside of the United States and don't have access to traditional banking services for international currency, you can buy and sell whatever you want using Tether. But of course, Tether is surveilled by the intelligence services. So nothing you do using Tether stable coins will go outside the gaze of the CIA and various organizations. Sure. And in the case of ISO 20022, of course, everything can be programmed and monitored and surveilled. And
in other words, it's like the global standardized framework for surveilling every banking transaction that you ever make.
Pretty much, it's digital. It's digital tokens on speed, but instead of it just being about fiat currency in digital form, like stable coins, it's pretty much digital everything. So it means if these large corporations, private equity firms, and so on, continue to claw assets, farmland, conglomerations of residential property, whatever it might be, mortgages. and individual mortgages as well. All of that will be tokenized and traded on an international agreed network, and anybody who holds debt, you'll interact with the system in the same way as you do currently, but behind the scenes, everything will be tokenized and traded, and will be programmable. So in effect, you'll lose all agency, and everything will be at the behest of the central banks. So but I would draw people's attention to the interview I did with Miles Harris, and I'll put up some snippets on the LinkedIn, our tech freedom.
It's terrifying, honestly, and I mean, what to say? I mean, this is also a really complex topic, right? And you obviously understand it well, etc. It's not easy for the average person to understand what this is about. I mean, you explain it well, but for a lot of people, this is right over their heads, and they don't understand. Most people would not understand how this really takes away your freedom. I mean, we've had central banks eroding our money away and printing money to support wars and pandemics or whatever forever, right? And these, in my opinion, central banks are a big reason why we are where we are, because the money printing is out of control, and it gives so much power to politicians, etc. This is exactly that, except, as you said, on steroids, because when you digitize it, you can then control everything much more fiercely, right? But I think it's very hard. I mean, most people won't understand it at all. I'm glad we bring it up, and we should probably come back to it a number of times, because by its nature, these tokenization, etc., is not a simple topic, I don't think, right? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, it's not simple, but conceptually, I think if you can understand the idea of currency, such as a dollar being turned into a digital form,
sure,
it's a good exemplar for what they're trying to do here. So, and of course, the Trump administration has been going headlong into this whole thing. Howard Lutnick, who was the ex-CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, is essentially the custodian of Tether's treasury bills. So it sort of holds on behalf of Tether all of these treasury bills. But the interesting thing is now that Tether is now moving into gold. So rather than have people hold physical gold, which obviously is increasing value, Tether is now launching a thing called XAUT. So they're going to be launching a token where they're saying, we hold all this gold for you. You don't need to worry about this. Don't worry about holding gold, because we're going to hold it for you. And you can buy Tether gold tokens, XAUT, just as you can hold Tether stable coins. And of course, it means that Tether then gets all of the gain in terms of the increase in the value of gold, and people are just left holding these tokens.
Absolutely.
So this ISO 20022 will be essentially doing this on speed. Everything, gold, silver, property, yada yada, will all be tradable using digital tokens, which they can frankly switch on and off whenever they choose to. And of course, if they suspect that you might be a nefarious character, they can say, oh, no, you're not going to get access to your tokens, because we're going to switch them off because we don't like the cut of your jib or what you're saying on social media.
Exactly. That's of course one of the big threats. It's actually interesting that you bring this up, because I did want to make a comment which is which is related to this, by the way, but which is very much less to do with technology and more to do with what's going on. Because the antithesis to what you're saying, Jeff, is to actually hold stuff like this. And I really recommend, not financial advice, but I recommend people really look into this, because holding silver, physical silver, here's a bar, right? Which I do, and I also hold physical gold, is really the antithesis of what's going on in the financial markets. They're trying essentially to control every detail of your financial situation. But if you hold real money in your hand, all right, it's very difficult for them to do anything about it. And it's a great way to make sure that you actually have your wealth preserved. I wanted to show this because just for interest, there's a 40-year cup and handle pattern and if you know technical analysis, I don't know if people do know that, but this is the cup, this is the handle. And the silver market that goes back to 1980s, and it just broke out. Silver is now $57. It's gone up like 100% over a year or something crazy like that. So silver and gold, they are both going up very, very quickly. So this is something for people to look into. And what I do recommend is, have a look at actually keeping a stash and starting to stack these things, because it's very difficult, of course, or a lot more difficult for anyone to come after your wealth if you actually hold it in your hand in physical form. So I just wanted to mention this, Jeff, because I think just also as an aside to your point, and this is really the antithesis of all the tether and tokenization and so on going on, right? And you can still get it. I'm actually sometimes amazed that they haven't outlawed this yet, because here in Denmark, and I'm sure you can in the UK, you can go pretty much buy as much gold, physical gold, as you want, as you have money for. They haven't stopped that. I'm wondering for how much longer that's going to be.
Oh, I know, and of course there is precedent for them stopping. During the 1930s, of course, purchasing of gold was outlawed when America came off the gold standard as well. But the thing about silver, though, is of course that you can hold, you can buy lots of silver coins and so on, and it may well be that silver becomes a trading. A trading currency, and that's why it's quite handy, because gold is at over $3,000 an ounce. So if you can hold silver, which again has been going up, it means that ultimately it could become a trading currency, and it will be the equivalent of cash, because they will. The European Union is moving towards essentially eradicating cash, and of course it means that ultimately if the fiat currency inflates, then it means you're having to spend an awful lot more of those euros in order to buy everyday items. Whereas currency, physical metal currency, will hold its value much more than fiat currency.
No question about it. And I think people are waking up to this as well. And I think we'll see the silver price and the gold price go up a lot more. And some people are predicting many hundreds of dollars within a relatively short period of time for silver. And silver right now, it broke out and it's now at 57. It could go to several $100, which is many multiples. So something for people to think about out there. I'm a big silver stacker, also gold stacker. I used to be in Bitcoin. I rotated out of that. Bitcoin didn't do much for me this year, so I rotated out of that. But silver's looking really good. So and it also feels good to hold physical money in your hand, so you have control of it. Jeff, talk to me a little bit about this. This has to do with NVIDIA and, of course, the gigantic AI.
It's actually an interesting segue as well, because you're talking about assets that have value like gold and silver, and whereas we've been told that holding NVIDIA stock is the route to riches, and of course the stock has been performing incredibly well, largely as a result of the creation of what a lot of people now are referring to as a circular market. Yes. So all of the big AI companies, particularly NVIDIA, who make the chips in order to create the data centers that are needed to provide the AI services from companies such as OpenAI, ChatGPT. These companies have been growing like crazy because everybody wants to build new data centers. Oracle has committed to build data centers on behalf of the AI companies such as OpenAI. And of course, then NVIDIA needs to make more chips in order to put into the data centers in order to provide the AI services. But meanwhile, nobody's actually paying OpenAI for its services. Most people are using ChatGPT absolutely free. So the revenue model that is normally required by any startup, it certainly goes out the window. Just let's build the data centers, give them whatever the hell they want, and let's build more data centers. And then we're going to have to build nuclear power stations to power the data centers. So it's a circular economy. The money is being recycled across all of these big tech bros. So Oracle, Microsoft, OpenAI, they're all sort of trading between each other. And as a result, people obviously want a share of the action, so that they've been buying the stock. But now people are wondering, there was a report produced by HSBC essentially saying that this cannot be sustained because the business model just doesn't work. People are not paying for this stuff. There is no revenue coming in apart from within the circular economy. So as a result, people have been getting jittery, and NVIDIA's stock recently has been very volatile, and in one period tanked by as the screen says there, by 450 billion, nearly half a trillion dollars. You know, this is incredible stuff. And of course, the combined market capitalization of the so-called Magnificent Seven, the tech bro stocks, at one point was over $22 trillion. It dominates the global economy. And if this market tanks, which it almost certainly will, we're going to see a massive recalibration of the market caps of these companies. What are the consequences going to be? Because, and then there's the other aspect to it as well. And I interviewed recently Nick Hudson, who runs a hedge fund down in Cape Town.
This is Nick, by the way, and he's a hero of mine. I've never met him, but I know you interviewed him. And is that going to be available? Have you made the interview available?
It's already on. If you look at the bottom of the caption under my name, the New Era UK. So that's my Substack. But I'm going to be featuring again some snippets from this interview on the Tech for Freedom LinkedIn page. And Nick talked about how AI really is being used to potentially create a surveillance state. You know, as people become more and more dependent on AI, my goodness, they're even developing relationships with AI bots.
Oh, goodness.
You know, they're going to become more and more dependent, and therefore they can be surveilled, essentially. You know, and now we've heard that OpenAI may indeed be considering advertising revenue in order to plug this gap. They won't be able to get anywhere near what they need to make, really, in terms of becoming a business.
I was just going to say that is absolutely going to come crashing down. There's no question about it. The only question of time, and I don't think it's going to take that long, because, as you said, there is no revenue. And I keep asking people, when people, go on raving about how great AI is and how it's going to revolutionize our world, blah, blah, blah. And then I ask them, what is the revenue stream? You tell me, how are these companies making money? They're making money, as you said, on each other. So, and the other question is, I don't know if I mean, you probably were subjected to this, but remember in the olden days, if you had an idea, some entrepreneurial idea, right? And you wanted to present it to your management or investors or whatever, they would ask you, so what problem are we solving?
Yeah.
And I would really like to know, what problem is AI solving? Because they're very unspecific about that. If you're solving for, unintelligent humans, I think we have a problem. That in itself is an issue, because I don't think we want to solve with, I don't think we want technology to make people smarter, not dumber, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the consequences of the dependence on AI is that it's a bit like the circular economy I was talking about, but it's the circular knowledge, because obviously AI engines are essentially they're plagiarizing existing knowledge from human beings. And if they circulate only their own plagiarized knowledge between themselves, eventually we'll reach a plateau in terms of human innovation, because we cannot depend on digital technology to create intelligence. It simply doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It simply takes what we have done and rehashes it and makes it appear that it's intelligent. It isn't. And people need to realize that if they get dependent on this stuff, they're essentially in a digital prison. They're not thinking. They're not thinking for themselves, and they're being surveilled. And of course, now we've had the prospect of, given the fact that they can't make money, these AI companies like OpenAI, there's the prospect that they might need to be bailed out, because now it's being spun that there's some type of AI war being waged between the United States and China. What nonsense. This is all to perpetuate this circular economy. And of course, I
totally agree. And I actually had a long discussion with one of my colleagues about this. So I actually think that even within a relatively short period of time, AI has risks of imploding for exactly the reason that you described here. In that, if you become lazy and think that AI, ChatGPT, whatever it is, actually is a source of information, and you keep using it as a source of information without actually generating original thought, ideas, and content, if you stop doing that, right, and you get so lazy, then what will happen is it will feed on itself, exactly as you described. It will feed on itself, right? So let me give a precise example. If journalists, for example, stop wanting to actually do their own research and said, "Oh, I'm just going to go to AI. I'm super lazy. I'm going to make it, regurge whatever's out there." And if they do that more often than actually going out and finding their own information, then the sum total of the knowledge in the world is going to contract, right? And that means AI will eventually implode upon itself because you'll get nothing useful, new information out of it, right? And then I don't know what's going to happen because it's probably going to take people a long time to figure out that that's what's happening. So, but in any case, it's a horrible situation, and it's not really going to solve anything for anyone, and it's just going to make us dumber, honestly, which is a really sad state of affairs. Let me just segue into this because this is highly related to this exact discussion. So Sam Altman says he now does not want the government to bail out OpenAI if it fails. First of all, it will most certainly fail. Secondly, and I don't, unfortunately, it's not that I want to revel in bad news, but I think we're not too far away from that. But these are the famous last words, similar to Bill Clinton. If you're my age and Jeff's age, you'll remember that he said, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman." Remember that, Jeff? So, but of course, Sam Altman is going to get exactly this because, as you said, it's become a global geopolitical battle that is, as you said, also constructed, manipulated, right? And this is why it's getting so much attention. And he says he doesn't want the government to bail him out. But of course, when it fails, the government will bail him out because at that point, it will have been positioned as, we need to do this. It's too big to fail. If we don't bail them out, we're going to lose to China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this will happen for sure. And I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's also a very neat exemplar of how whatever political party is in power, essentially what they've been doing is, certainly over the last decade or so, is just increasing the amount of debt. Because they appear not to care. So, under Trump 1.0, he increased debt markedly, and then Biden continued the process. And now we're at 38 trillion or something of debt. And then you've got the AI companies' debt up to the eyeballs, and now asking to be bailed out by a debt-laden government. 38 trillion? It's probably heading towards 40 trillion in the new year. And so it means that essentially they're giving up on fiat currency. So it goes back to the start of our conversation that they need desperately to create a new system, a new monetary system that is able to tie us up in knots because they've lost control. They've lost control of the AI bubble. They've lost control of public debt. And the only way out really is that the financial system as it's currently constituted will collapse. And it may well be that the AI bubble is the start of that collapse, because if 22 trillion suddenly disappears out of the economy, where are we left? And maybe your little bars of silver will become much more important then.
No, absolutely, and I think it is unprecedented. The valuations involved are so insane that I think anyone who is capable of reasoning just a little bit can see that this is just run off the tracks and it's not going to end well. It's just madness. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, by the way, we are going to have a major financial monetary reset. I think there's any question about it. And I think Trump is probably going to revalue gold so as to, but the issue is then nobody knows how much gold is actually in Fort Knox because they didn't want to audit.
It went away, didn't it, very quickly? At one point we had Musk saying that he was going to audit what gold was in Fort Knox, and then that conversation kind of ended.
Kind of stopped, yeah. So, but I think, and there's all kinds of speculation. There's a lot of gold that has recently left from your shores, I was going to say, London to U.S. And some people speculate that it's U.S. government actually trying to replenish whatever was there in Fort Knox and such. So there's all kinds of theories. But it is one way of at least delaying the impending sovereign debt collapse, is to revalue the gold in Fort Knox, which is now valued at something like $43 or something, some low value, statutory value. And now, of course, the gold price is like $4,200, whatever. So that would certainly help. There's all kinds of theories on that. But I think we are going to have a sovereign debt crisis, and it's probably going to start in Japan. Japan is 200 or 300% underwater in terms of GDP, in terms of debt to GDP. So it's absolutely disastrous in Japan. And there's a lot of countries. Also, Southern Europe is in bad shape, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not looking good. But the good news, though, to be optimistic, is that, let's say that happens, and I feel terrible for all the people that will suffer immensely under this. But when we get to the other side, maybe that would have cleaned out a lot of the crazies that are right now.
Yeah, and it does quite. People have asked me what I think that the outcome would be if we do see a fundamental collapse, and I touched on this in my interview with Miles Harris. But obviously one consequence is people need to focus on what's absolutely fundamentally important. It's about putting food on the table. It's about not getting into debt. Debt is the evil. If governments have got themselves into this situation by becoming indebted and they've destroyed fiat currencies, etc., we need to take a leaf out of the sort of more ethical book and say, avoid debt, because if you're in debt, you're a slave to the system.
100%.
The system is going to run everything. So avoid debt like the plague, and focus on what's important. Eating good food. Spending time with your family, maybe even starting to think about growing food again, and building. A lot of people assume that they have to outsource the process of building, because
old school, a lot of old school traditional values, they will come back, and I think that to some extent they are coming back, because people are. And it's not that, that sounds like it sounds like I'm a Luddite. I'm certainly not. I love technology and have been supporting it and working with my entire career. But as you said, as we started by saying, it should enrich our lives. It should give opportunity for individual freedom, individual wealth creation, and all of that. And this is not what we're seeing right now. Let me bring this up just quickly. I don't know if you saw this. You guys in United Kingdom are outside of the EU. Thankfully, I don't know if you're better off or worse off. It might be.
In name only, frankly, I don't think we've really left. Seems to be the Starmer is beholden to every EU initiative.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the horror we're now faced with here in the EU at the moment. And the European Parliament I don't think this is now finally approved or settled as a law, but they have voted on something along these lines. And so this is, they're backing the 16+ age rule for social media. In my view, of course, another horrible transgression of individual rights, whether you believe that there's an issue with, kids being exposed to bad stuff online or whatever, or not. This is not the way to solve it, of course, because what happens here is that the kids might not be able to get on, but you're going to have to prove your identity to get on.
Yeah, right? Well, they do this by any means that they can. They want you to identify yourself, to provide ID. So they're coming up with all number of weird and wonderful techniques. It's the same in the UK for the national digital ID rollout. By the way, digital ID cards are a bit of a red herring, because the UK government has been working on digital ID for decades through organizations like the Government Digital Service. And the United States are working towards it from the perspective of voter ID. So they're going to come up with some method of getting you to identify yourself and prove who you are. And then, of course, you'll have a QR code to be able to go to the supermarket and buy potatoes. It's absurd. It's getting absurd. But the same thing is happening in the European Union. They're coming up with weird and wonderful ways to get people to provide digital identity. And this is yet another one. But there's also behind the scenes this sort of conflict between European tech and American tech. You know, American tech is conveyed as being all bad. Often it is, by the way, but unfortunately it's the wrong fight to pick. You know, they need to be working in more fun, building European tech, you know, building wonderful startups, supporting those small businesses wanting to grow and take on the titans. But instead, they're coming up with more regulations as a means of controlling technology. It's absurd.
It's absurd, and they're not in the least bit interested in supporting small companies. They're not. They would rather see them all go away because they can work with big companies, but small companies are hard to work with because they're generally not interested in working with the government because there's not a lot to gain from it. But for big companies, there certainly is, right? So,
and we saw that with Trump's visit because he brought out over all of the tech bros. You know, Larry Ellison, you know, formerly of the CIA, has been working with every Western European government for decades.
Right.
So these big guys, Oracle and Microsoft, and you know, Microsoft's Azure platform now pretty much dominates government.
Yes.
But during the COVID lockdowns. Suddenly, every business, every government entity was using all of these conferencing tools on the Microsoft platforms and so on. So there's this constant buddying up. The European Union might make mood music in terms of its opposition to US tech, but when it comes to the bit, they end up buying this technology and using it and forcing it to be used. And of course. Yeah. Social media doesn't start and stop with Facebook. You know, there are other platforms available, and people can build their own. You know, why not? Yeah. Why not break away by encouraging competition rather than mandating regulations?
100%. And I can tell you, I don't know what it's like in the UK. I sort of follow it, but certainly in this country, in Denmark, where I am, there is no real opposition to these things. I mean, we have the unit party essentially. And the amount of debate there is on issues like these is very, very little. I mean, it's sometimes they pay lip service to a few debates and then they end up, you know, voting together with whatever the European Commission wants, right? And those people, of course, are famously unelected, and we can't remove them, by the way, by elections either. So it's absolutely run off the rails. And the opposition there is are a few scattered people, very brave and courageous people that I very strongly support, but there's very few of them, right? There's no sort of block of opposition against this in any proper sense, at least not a block of opposition that has any voice in the media, because of course the media kills them, right? And destroys is character assassination immediately, right? So it's quite a dire state of affairs. I wanted just to bring up this picture. I don't know if you know what this is. It's very dramatic. This is what happened in Nepal some months ago, where they shut down social media. There was just a comment on, you know, trying to curtail, you know, social media as a free platform for everyone, free in the sense of being able to speak your mind and not having need to be identified or whatever. The corrupt Nepalese government decided to shut everything down, and as a consequence, this was mostly the youth, in fact, that revolted, and they burned down the government building in Kathmandu. I'm not kidding. I don't know if you followed this, Jeff, but it was super dramatic. They dragged. I'm not encouraging people to do this, by the way. It's not my call for armed revolution, but I just wanted to show people what happened. And they also dragged some of the politicians through the river in Nepal. I mean, it was just complete mayhem, but it just shows the discontent when you start picking away at people's, you know, digital free expression. And these young people just had enough. Yeah. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen in Europe or should happen in Europe, but there's such a pent-up frustration at, you know, all these rules and regulations that are not in the least in the interest of the public, and that we somehow can't get rid of, right? It's an abomination that we have the European Commission, in my opinion, and it's just really, really getting worse and worse every day.
Yeah, and it shows the importance of people being able to talk. You know. Yeah. Like your conferences focus on, you know, public Wi-Fi, for example. You know, Wi-Fi is the enabling technology
to allow people to talk. There's two bits at the end of the string, two devices or two computers, but really it's about two people having a conversation, or a bunch of people having a conversation. And there is a fundamental human right that people should be able to talk and meet and have conversation. And it's appalling when those rights they attempt to take them away. And of course they did during the COVID era, when they started censoring, deplatforming people. Twitter, X did it. The FBI was working in Twitter's offices in South of Market. By the way, that's the reason I called my novel, South of Market.
Oh, okay.
Because Twitter's headquarters, they're populated by agents from the CIA and FBI censoring ordinary people's conversations. It's absurd. And of course, now we have Elon Musk censoring them, not by saying that they can't say things, but just clamping down on their reach, so that you can say certain things. So you've got freedom of speech, but not necessarily freedom of reach. But this is the type of thing that happens when people's ability to have conversations with each other is curtailed. So they're absolutely right. Obviously, violence should always be condemned, but frustration is the inevitable consequence of government regulation and government diktat.
It is, and we somehow let them get away with it during the pandemic, or most people let them get away with it, and so now they're back for more. Honestly, I think this is really what we can conclude, because there was not enough resistance during the pandemic. I think way too many people were asleep. Of course, there is an excellent freedom community, and the more people are waking up to it, but by and large, they got away with it, right? And that still needs to be cleaned up. And I think there is, to some degree, some cleanup happening, or has happened, but not nearly enough. I mean, there should be a truth commission on all the things that happened during the pandemic, and the people that were responsible and colluded with government for it should be investigated under oath in public, right? And all these things, should happen, but none of them have happened. I know you've had something along the lines of a commission of sorts on the pandemic in the UK, which was apparently an absolute
whitewash. Yeah. And the main conclusion was that the United Kingdom should have locked down sooner and harder and longer. And all of the political parties are of the similar view. The so-called Reform Party, which is the most likely party to form the next government in the United Kingdom, very close, obviously, to the Musk administration and the tech bros.
Yeah,
they just do more of the same. It's just the Uni Party just constantly rebrands, and the deep state, unfortunately, isn't going to do anything to improve the lot of ordinary individual citizens. And of course, so many businesses went to the wall during lockdown, right across Europe, right across the developed world, to the benefit, of course, of the large corporates and the tech bros. And but there are enough of us. I think you're right, Klaus. I think there's enough of us saying this now. Most people don't accept that lockdown made any sense whatsoever. So, I think there is hope, but it's down to, unfortunately, it's down to us to say enough is enough. But they're not, no salvation. No politician offers salvation.
No, they do not. A recent poll in the United States showed, this is just from, I think, probably less than a month ago, that more than 50%, the majority of Americans now believe that the COVID vaccines were and are harmful. So this is part of an awakening, right? The issue is constantly that even though I think there are a lot of things that are generally accepted in the public, they're not represented in government. These views are not represented in government. So there is a dislocation between, very, very fierce and strong dislocation between what's actually going on in government and with the tech bros, etc., and what the public actually thinks, and that can only lead to some form of upheaval, and we're going to get it in some form or other. I very much hope it's a peaceful one, but people are going to get terribly frustrated, and many of us already are, right? And I don't see this. I don't. It's still going in the wrong direction. But I mean, I think there's a general movement towards more understanding of these things, right? But in terms of what it's actually happening, it's still going in the wrong direction. Do you agree with that, Jeff?
Yeah, I think governments are overstretching themselves, and they're beginning, like, even the election of Trump in the United States, the MAGA movement and so on is splintering. You know, we saw that over the Charlie Kirk assassination. And you know, we've now got the right in the United States splintering, and I think there's an appreciation that they have gone too far, and they don't know where to go. The only place that they can go is to try to thieve people's assets, their money in banks, but also their physical assets as well. And if they continue doing that, that's the cracking point. That's when people will say enough is enough, and governments will start to collapse. I think we're beginning to see the early stages of that in the United States. And I think that the attempt to control, for example, J.D. Vance by Peter Thiel and a number of the other technocrats, this will be outed very quickly. And I would encourage people to read the works of people like Whitney Webb, who have been exposing this stuff for quite some time. And of course, the Epstein files, that's another thing that's still bubbling under the surface and may result in the destruction of the American government as we know it.
Right. I don't know if you saw this recently. This is also just maybe weeks ago. The Italian government, of all people, are now suggesting that people declare their gold, their family heirlooms, essentially, and pay tax on them, which is the crowning achievement of absurdity. But this just tells you how far down the road they are, the road towards...
it's similar, actually, in the United Kingdom. The Chancellor just announced a tax on mansions on very large properties, you know, and people don't necessarily see the implications of this, because it may mean that if a wealthy property owner decides not to pay this mansion tax, it could mean that the state can come in and sequester the assets of billionaires. You know, so people need to think very, very carefully about the consequences of taxes that may well be seen to be popular, but could result in dystopia, frankly.
Absolutely. I like to think that when we get, there's still a long ways to go, but a gentleman by the name of Martin Armstrong, actually, he's an interesting guy. I don't know if you know him, but he had, and that's a long story in its own right, but he has a predictive model on general societal movements and so on, including social upheaval, etc., and when things break down and whatever. He says once we get into the 2030s, once we get into that, things will start to look better. We still have a few years of probably horrific collapse ahead of us, unfortunately. But once we get on that side, things will start to look better. And I like the way that he says it. We have to become the founding fathers of whatever comes next. I love that, right?
Yeah.
We sort of have to, for the time being, put up with this madness. So of course resist it, but also understand that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. And I keep thinking that libertarian values, to me, I mean, if they were implemented properly, minimal government, etc., I mean, it would usher in a new golden age of humanity, honestly. I mean, that's how important I think it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what is currently defined and promoted as democracy isn't democracy at all. It's an oligarchy. And the oligarchs are pretty much in control, but I think they're beginning. There's an expression in where I come from in Ireland, where we say people are losing the run of themselves. In other words, they've overextended themselves. They've started to believe their own PR.
Yes.
people I think, are genuinely seeing through the BS, and they realize what's going on, and they see the oligarchs for what they are, and frankly, they are thieves and tyrants.
Of course they are.
And companies like Palantir and are essentially getting into the heart of government in order to implement surveillance, digital ID, and to essentially own the citizen. Well, it's not for sale. Our individual rights and freedoms are not for sale.
Are not for sale. And you can say we were productized through all of those big companies, right? Google ads, which is basically what Google is, an ad company, and Facebook ads. We were productized for many years now. But the next level is, of course, to productize everything about us, including our every detailed emotion that can then be predicted through whatever side or whatever. I mean, it's next level productization of the human being, which is just madness, right? I mean, to some level, to some degree, I'm okay with ads if they finance something, and sometimes they're even useful. But this is just run amok, right? So it's just totally crazy. Jeff, let me bring this up. This is something that I found. I think this was on LinkedIn. I found it really funny. I don't know how you feel about EVs. I really hate EVs. I really do.
I detest them.
Me too, because for many reasons. First of all, I don't think they're good cars. I don't like them as cars. They have about as much charm as riding the metro, right? So there's no experience. But not only that, they're also being forced down our throat, especially here in Scandinavia. And there's so many people that buy these things, and I keep looking at my neighbors that have all their charging stations, the EVs. You're never going to get me to buy one of those things ever. I'll be the last person here, driving a metro. But I thought this was really fun and actually exactly accurate. So imagine if we lived in a world where cars were EVs, all cars were EVs, and then along comes the new invention, the internal combustion engine. Think how well it would sell, right? A vehicle half the weight, half the price, a quarter of the damage to the road, can be refueled in 1/10 of the time, has a range of 4 times, right? EVs in all weather conditions, does not rely on environmentally damaging use of rare earths, etc., etc. Think of how excited people would be for such. It would sell like hotcakes. And this is so precise. I have yet, except for acceleration, there is no benefit. And also the tax benefits, of course, if you want to mess with them.
But they're rigged. The benefits are essentially rigged because the cost of these things has been subvented by just about every Western government. Because, of course, there's a great vested interest. They've said that, renewable energy and cheap electricity. Of course, electricity isn't cheap. The prices have been energy prices have been going through the roof. And like I live in Northern Ireland, our only power really pretty much comes from a huge, great big gas turbine power station. So they pitch these products as being environmentally friendly and running on electricity, but of course the electricity is produced by fossil fuels in the first place. It's different obviously in Scandinavia and the Nordics because you have so much hydropower. We don't have that here. And of course, governments have underinvested in nuclear. Now we're having to take the lead from organizations like Oracle building nuclear power stations in order to run data centers. How crazy is this? We have wonderful technology. I have a Mazda and a Toyota sitting outside, both petrol-powered cars. Wonderful technology. The Japanese still make brilliant cars. Mm-hmm. And Toyota, bless them, have committed to hybrid technology.
Yes.
Because obviously there is a role for, electricity, motor supported fossil fuel powered engines. That's great technology. So why aren't we investing in this? Extremely clean as well. And even Honda was developing very clean diesel engines. But of course, then the whole wave moved towards so-called EVs. I prefer to call them battery cars because they remind me of those little cars you used to play with as a kid. And of course, you were always going to your mommy saying, "Can I get some more new batteries? Because this thing doesn't anymore." Precisely.
Adam, you're 100% spot on. I mean, when they first came out, I was curious about them in a sort of, shall we say, gadgety sort of sense, right? So I think, okay, this is cool. It's got nice software in it. It's probably a nice little niche market, people that, like all this software stuff and can do this, and people that are very environmentally conscious or whatever. And that was fine. But once they started forcing them down our throats, right, and starting having this as a political statement and obviously in cahoots with governments again, I really started fiercely disliking them. And the other thing, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but the other thing here is noticed that some of these electric cars, the electric SUVs are gigantic. They're massive. They're like 3 times the size of a normal car here. And I mean, I haven't even seen cars that size with petrol engines in this country, because we're a small country and most people like small cars. Yeah. But now people start buying these gigantic cars. They're running about it. It's just mad. And I'm sure they feel very good about it, right? Very politically correct about it. It's all a mess. And what I can tell you, Jeff, is what I believe is that all this green stuff, once the monetary reset comes, the real crash, and it will, all the green technology is going to go straight for the junkyard, because it's the most expensive. It's the worst, right? It's the least efficient. People say it's efficient. It's not. It's all going to go to the junkyard, and we're going to be back to where we were with fossil fuels, which I think is fine. I don't see any big threat. And as you said, the technology in fossil fuels and combustion engines and so on has advanced over 150 years or whatever. I mean, very, very sophisticated, right? I don't see anything wrong with it. So that's my view. I can feel that you share it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I've taken the pledge that I will never drive an electric vehicle.
Me too. Me too. I might be the last person in this country. But I think what's going to happen is that the premium on used petrol cars is going to go up.
Yeah. I think it's there is no. I think we could debate this in another conversation as to what was the most liberating technology to be developed. But I would say up there, it's not the internet. I think it's probably the internal combustion engine.
Personal mobility, right? Personal mobility. Absolutely. Yeah. I would agree with that. Jeff, we made it to the hour. We thought we were going to keep it to half hour, which is of course not possible.
But talk about Klaus.
Sorry, come again.
We have much to talk about.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about. And once we're let loose in a podcast like this, it never stops. Jeff, it's great to speak to you. Let's do another one of these. We'll collect some more interesting news items for our next version. I don't know what it's going to be, but everybody out there, keep an eye out for it. And it's a joy to speak to you, Jeff. And let's keep pushing the good story, I think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's great to work with you. And let's do more of this. And obviously, we'll post this on our LinkedIn page, but please do comment below if you've got any perspectives and follow the LinkedIn page. We'll try to keep it as updated as often as we can.